during the course of the year. And the first Polly to come on Rich Show for the year is Josh Frydenberg, who I think is doing a pretty good job in energy. And I spoke to him a couple of hours ago. Have a listen to this. Josh Frydenberg, welcome to the program. It's been a long time since I spoke to you, and of course you are my first political guest of the year.
What a great honour, Richo, and it's great to see you back in the chair and looking forward to working on a unity ticket to get better energy outcomes for Australia.
Yes, well, we certainly need to do that. Now, I think the big debate of this year will finish up being something about energy security, about whether or not we can always be sure the lights will go on. How sure are you in South Australia at the moment that the lights will stay on?
Well, we're doing everything we can with the Australian Energy Market Operator and the state government to ensure more stability in that state. I was there just yesterday and met with a whole range of businesses, from wool processors to plastic manufacturers, wine producers, and I visited a seafood business which had taken the not now unusual step of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own money to create backup generators so that they don't lose power. So business is very scared in South Australia, and that's a problem. But what we've done is we've ensured now that there are two synchronous baseload power generators on in South Australia at any one time. And as you know, in South Australia they don't have any more coal since the closure of the Northern Power Plant, so those two synchronous baseload generators have to be gas. We've also reduced some of the pressure on the interconnector, providing power from Victoria into South Australia, which will now make South Australia less vulnerable, and we've got more of the detail around the operational settings of those wind farms which went down in September, which contributed to the statewide blackout.
Yeah, I think there are a number of contributing factors, but one of them's got to be, when you look at the future anyway, how do we get the power? Because a lot of our coal-fired power stations, and there are a couple in New South Wales that close over the next decade. Now, all of them were built with technology that's 50 years old, and I think technology for generators these days is so much better. Why don't we build some new coal-fired plants? Josh, why couldn't we build one in North Queensland? Why can't we build another one in New South Wales? Because if these ones close and renewables don't pick up the slack, and they certainly haven't been picking up the slack at the rate that would be required, then how do we keep the lights on? I'm really worried about that for the future.
Well, this is the question that the Prime Minister posed the other night at his press club speech. He said we'd spent $590 million since 2009 on a combination of demonstration projects and research and development of carbon capture and storage and of clean coal, but we haven't actually got one of those ultra supercritical plants here in Australia. Now, we've looked around the region and we see more than 700 of these high efficiency, low emission coal-fired power plants which can produce baseload synchronous power, stabilising the system while reducing emissions by around 40%. Now, I went to one of these sites in Yokohama, Japan, not that long ago, and it does provide enormous amounts of power to a large number of people and to help stabilise the system. So that's what we'll enter into discussions with industry, obviously with state governments, to see how can we stabilise the system and encourage the use of the abundance of coal that we have in Australia.
Remembering too that Hunter coal is the world standard for coal. I mean, it's supposed to be the best. So we do have the cleanest coal to start with. If you match that with the right technology, surely we should be able to build some coal-fired power stations. But one of the big problems, of course, now is the Greens get very active. And I note one of their spokesmen the other day in Melbourne talking about how they would pursue any company that supported Adani. Now, how are you going to get even the banks to put their hands up to support any new coal venture when you've got people like this running around saying, we'll punish you if you dare to try?
Well, what really concerns me is that the Labor Party, the alternative government in this country, has joined with the Greens to try to shut down our 24 coal-fired power stations. Now, that happened in the Senate when Sam Dastyari joined in a motion with his Greens counterpart to, quote, push for the forced closure of these plants, to kick-start, as Mark Butler has said, the closure of these plants. Now, that is not good news, and companies look at the Labor Party, look at the Greens and say, how can we invest with that level of animosity towards coal? Now, we have to get the Labor Party to see some sense in this. We have to get them to understand that the higher the electricity prices, the less coal that we have, the less stable the system, and therefore the more jobs that will be lost in manufacturing. It's not about, you know, renewables at any price. It's okay to have renewables as part of the energy mix, but as the Prime Minister said, we need to be technology neutral. We shouldn't be specifying all renewables or all gas or all coal. We need all of the above. That's where our approach differs from our Labor counterparts.
Well, I'm very disappointed in Labor over this, but I've written about that and talked about it so many times now, because they can't justify the 50% target by 2030, they say, until they're in government and get all the information. I've always believed you don't set a policy until you have all the information, but there you go. They certainly aren't on board with that. But the difficulty is, especially for Labor, I would have thought, is the amount that electricity prices will have to increase if they try and stick to these targets. Now, that increase in electricity prices, it might be okay for you or me, but the average punter out there, the families out in the suburbs that Malcolm says he knows so well, on $60,000 a year, and also, you know, you've got pensioners and all the rest of it. I mean, they're going to really struggle if there's these massive rises. And by the way, I'm told that it's even possible that prices can go up 50% in the next few years if we follow that RET path.
Well, you're right that Bill Shorten has this $48 billion impost on Australian households and businesses with his 50% renewable energy target by 2030. I actually think now, Richo, he's ashamed of that policy. I don't think he's got the guts to drop it, and I don't think he has the courage to defend it. I think he's actually been blindsided by Mark Butler, who doubles as the president of the Labor Party and who has been beholden to some of the grassroots branch members who's pushed this target upon the Labor Party. And you've seen the CFMEU write to all of the Labor Party members and say this will only drive up electricity prices. Now, I saw it firsthand the other day when I heard from food manufacturers in regional Victoria who said that they are being now forced to pay electricity prices 50% up on year. Now, you would say to those food manufacturers, could you pass that on to consumers? And their answer is no, they can't, because the Coles and the Woolworths say, well, we compete against imports, or we compete against Aldi, so we can't take your higher prices. So that means we're going to lose jobs in manufacturing or food processing because of this higher electricity prices, which are being forced upon by Bill Shorten's renewable energy target. Now, it's been costed by the Bloomberg Energy Finance Group as saying it will require $48 billion of investment. Inevitably, that investment needs to be recouped from consumers, so that gets passed on to them. So it's just a recipe for disaster in terms of price, but it's also a recipe for disaster in terms of stability, like what we've seen in South Australia, where more than 40% renewables has led to a much less stable system in South Australia, which we don't want replicated around the rest of the country.
No, well, in South Australia too, you know, you've got the problem where industry can't be guaranteed power. And of course, if you're out at one of, you know, the big steel plant, the trouble is if the power goes off and everything in the place goes hard instead of being heated and soft, then it's going to take a year to dig it all out. I mean, this is a really big problem. I'm not sure that people are across how dangerous this is. And so how do we guarantee big enterprises no interruption to power?
Well, we need to stabilise the system. That means we need more baseload power. We need more gas. We need a consistent clean coal, and we also do need more storage around some of the intermittent sources of power, namely the wind and solar we have. Now, you talk about South Australia. In June, July last year, Richo, on one day, wind provided 80% of the power. But on another day, wind provided just 1% of the state's power. How do you cope with such variability in the amount of supply that is coming into the grid? And one of the answers to that is storage, but it's going to take time. The Prime Minister's talked about getting more investment in pumped hydro and battery storage. But in the meantime, while that integration takes place, we need to stabilise the system. Now, those big energy users you referred to, like Arium at Whyalla, like the Nearstar with their Port Pirie smelter, or indeed BHP at Olympic Dam, they need to rely on consistent power from the grid. And it's not okay for Bill Shorten to say to the steelworkers in Whyalla, oh, we want Australians to buy Australian steel so we can help you keep your job. And on the other hand, for him to say, oh, we want a 50% renewable energy target so we're going to push up electricity prices. You've got to be consistent. And you've got to have a coherent energy message, and that's what the Prime Minister delivered to the Press Club the other night.
Well, when I listen to all these messages from everybody, I don't hear much about solar anymore, not much at all. Now, what do you think about solar power? If every household goes and sticks a few things on the roof, is it going to fix the problem?
Well, household solar has been taken up very quickly by a large number of Australians. In fact, we have the highest number on a per capita basis of households anywhere in the world with rooftop solar, about 15% of homes. Now, they have been encouraged to do so with generous feed-in tariffs, as you know, a subsidy from the taxpayer. Now, that is all well and good, but it's not enough to solve the broader energy problem that we're seeing across the manufacturing sector or across even those households that don't have that rooftop solar. Now, when you talk about grid-scale solar, yes, we are seeing much more investment in that, and they're being helped by our ARENA and Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the investments and the partnerships that they're making. And we've also seen a decrease in the prices of solar power by around 50% over the last 5 years, and it will continue to come down over time. But it is an important part of the future, but while the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, these intermittent sources of power can't provide the baseload 24/7 power that the grid needs.
Indeed they can't. I want to say thank you very much, Josh. I'm glad I'm on a unity ticket with you on trying to change Labor's policy on this, because I think the 50% target's a debacle. But anyway, we shall both continue to work upon it, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Richo. There's a lot to do. As you know, we've also got to push those Labor states to lift their gas moratoriums, because gas, as well as those renewable energy targets, are a big part of the solution.
Indeed they are. Thank you very much, Josh Frydenberg.
All the best.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you talk to someone like Frydenberg, he does make a lot of sense. And I want to say tonight to Bill Shorten, you really do have to stand up on this, Bill. I mean, I know you're a very clever bloke. You know, the IQ is pretty big. So you must know the policy's nonsense. Now, I know that you get attacked on the left flank in voter land by the Greens and by the left within the party internally. But one thing's for sure, leaders stand up and fight these things. If you base a policy on a nonsense, then you'll never, ever convince people it's a good idea. Remember Julia Gillard with the $24 price for her emissions trading scheme, when in reality, worldwide the price was about $6. You just look silly. And I've got to say, 50% renewable energy target by 2030 is a plain nonsense. For God's sake, stand up, tell those in the party and tell those out of the party that you're not going to go along with something that's as stupid as this. You're far too good for it, Bill.